Hi everybody, today we're going to talk about cardiac output. So to talk about cardiac output is a very important thing because this concept is vital and fundamental to your understanding of all the other disease processes that's related to cardiac, cardiorespiratory, and of the like. So first, you got to understand what cardiac output is. Cardiac output is actually driven by a formula, which is heart rate times stroke volume. So but stroke volume involves three different components. Cardiac output, as a general rule of thumb, runs about, 4 to 6 to 8 liters, a minute. Okay, so at any given point in time, you've got a ton of circulation that's circulating through the entire body. And so let's look at the components, okay? So you've got heart rate, which is, beats per minute by somebody's heart rate. Stroke volume is comprised of three different components. So let's draw this out for you. Okay, so you've got preload, and you've got contractility, and you've got afterload. So a couple of things here. So if you think about a preload, that's the volume being returned back to the heart from the inferior vena cava into the right atrium. It's also known as another term, CVP, or central venous pressure. It's also the end diastolic volume. And so, while the heart is at rest, it's got to fill. And so as the volume returns back, I kind of want you to think about the analogy of a balloon, because you have to be able to fill the chambers, so hence volume, load, fill the chambers, and when the pressures in one chamber exceeds the other, that's what's going to force the valves open and have it eject from one chamber to the other, okay? So understand preload. Now contractility is what I call stretch. So there's also a very big concept known as Frank-Starling's law, where the idea is that the tension and the greater the stretch would equal the greater the force of contraction. So again, I want you to think about it. If you blow up a balloon, hence, if you fill a chamber with, half the volume you're supposed to, just by filling up that volume, you're only going to stretch it so far, right? But if you take a balloon and let's say you blow it all the way up double the size, think about the rubber band effect. The more load you fill it with, the greater the stretch, the greater the retraction and the force of contraction that exists, all right? Now, afterload is resistance, okay? And two examples that will illustrate that. Resistance, kind of think hypertension or anything that the heart needs to work harder to overcome in order to be able to eject blood out of the chamber and circulate to the rest of the body. So some things to think about is, so that's the pressure you're working against. So the higher the pressure or the higher the resistance, the harder the heart has to work against. And so, for example, let's think about when you are to, open a door, but there's a lot of wind coming at the door. You would have to exert a certain amount of force or pressure against the door in order to overcome the wind pressure that's pushing against you in order to get the door open. And so that's resistance. Now, to illustrate how flexible your body can be and how it tries to keep it in a homeostatic type balance is that your cardiac output, remember, heart rate times stroke volume, which includes these three components. At any point in time when the body's trying to compensate, it has to be able to adjust certain components, in order to compensate. So I've kind of given you some numbers to play with. So you look up here, you got heart rate. Let's say you have a very well-trained athlete. A very well-trained athlete is able to use oxygen pretty efficiently. And as they use oxygen efficiently, their resting heart rate may run on the lower side because they don't need to pump that much in order to generate a stroke volume, which is the amount that is being pumped out with each beat. And so let's talk about ejection fraction. Ejection fraction, the percentage the left ventricle needs to pump out to circulate to the rest of the body. So EF is the ejection fraction, should generate somewhere around like 55 to 60%. So now that's a percentage, but you still have cardiac output, which is somewhere around, 4 to 6 liters a minute. But look at the heart rate. So let's say a well-trained athlete has a heart rate of 40, but let's say their stroke volume, these three components combined, is 100. So now you have 4 liters, right, of a cardiac output. But again, now let's say that you have somebody who maybe has just a slight tad of a diseased heart, maybe drops a little bit of their stroke volume because they got a little bit of hypertension. You've got to work a little harder in your afterload. Now you drop the stroke volume, but look, if you bump up the heart rate, so say the heart's trying to compensate, you still generate the same cardiac output just by playing with one certain component of the formula. So thank you, and that concludes the recording for cardiac output.